Hello. If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Imagine stepping onto a train, thinking it's just another ride home. But what if, instead, that train takes you somewhere you've never imagined? Join me on this eerie journey to the train to nowhere, where every station is stranger than the last, and the passengers are not what they seem. And wait, there's more. If you're looking to shed those extra pounds without lifting a finger, I've got just the thing for you. A weight loss dietary supplement that works even while you sleep. Curious? Click the link in the description below to learn more. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into this mysterious adventure. I remember the day like yesterday. The weather was just perfect. The sun shone bright, and the air felt nice and cool. I was running late for my usual train. I made it just in time and squeezed through the doors as they were closing. The train was packed, but I managed to find a spot by the window. I thought I was just going home after a long day. At first, everything felt normal. The train rattled along the tracks, and I could hear the soft chatter of other passengers. As we moved further away from the city, I noticed that the station started looking strange. The names on the signs were all different, names I'd never heard before. I began to feel a little uneasy, but I brushed it off. Maybe I was just tired. As the train zoomed past a station, I glanced out the window. Something moved in the corner of my eye. I looked closer, and that's when I saw it. A dark figure standing on the platform. It looked like a person, but its face was in shadow. I felt a chill run down my spine. The train didn't stop, and I could barely see the figure before it disappeared. I quickly turned back to the cabin, trying to shake off the feeling. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. Everything was confusing. Other passengers still sat in silence, their eyes glued to the floor. It was so quiet. I felt as if I were the only one alive. I wanted to talk to someone, but their faces seemed to blend into one another, like they were all made from the same mold. I felt a sense of dread creeping over me. After a while, the train slowed down before another station. I leaned forward, eager to see where we were. The sign read, "Whispers Hollow." My heart raced. The name sounded so eerie. A tingling sense of danger wrapped around me. I needed to get off. I pressed the button to open the doors, but nothing happened. I pulled and pushed, but the doors were stuck tight. "Can anyone help?" I asked, turning to the people around me. They didn't respond. Their faces remained blank, as if they had turned into statues. My throat tightened with fear. "Help me! Let me out!" I shouted, but my voice echoed back in an empty, hollow way. The train began to move again, heading into a tunnel. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. I looked back and saw a passenger staring right at me. Their eyes were wide, and their mouth moved, but no sound came out. I felt my breath quicken, and I turned away. What was happening? The tunnel was dark, and every second felt like an eternity. I clutched my bag to my chest and felt a sudden urge to cry. Just then, the lights flickered again, and for a brief moment, I saw something terrifying. Shadows danced along the walls, morphing into twisted faces that seemed to scream silently. I shut my eyes tightly, hoping it was just a trick of the light. When the train finally emerged from the tunnel, we were at another station. This one was named The Lost. I looked around nervously. The station platform looked old, with broken lights and weeds growing up through the cracks. It didn't feel safe. I stared at the doors, willing them to open. I couldn't just sit here, not with everything getting stranger by the minute. I approached the doors, my heart pounding. I looked back at the other passengers, but they hadn't moved an inch. I banged on the glass, desperate. "Please, let me out." My voice was shaking now. As I stared out at the platform, I noticed something horrible. A dark shadow moving in the corner, slinking like a cat. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered again, and this time they went out completely. The train was plunged into darkness. I felt the world spinning around me. I fumbled in my bag, searching for my phone, but all I could find was my wallet. Panic surged through me. What was I going to do? After what felt like forever, the lights came back on, but the train was not moving. In fact, the strange shadow from outside had gotten closer. I could see it now, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes, reaching toward the train with long, bony fingers. I gasped and stumbled back. My heart raced faster than ever. "Get away!" I yelled, feeling helpless. No one responded. They all remained just as they were, frozen in their seats, oblivious to the horror outside. I turned my back on the terrible figure, my eyes scanning the cabin for an escape. I needed to get off this train. I pressed the button again, harder this time, shouting, "Open the doors, please." But still nothing happened. I pulled at the handle, and the train jolted as it began moving again. The next station popped up quickly on the screen above. Fear's End. I craned my neck to look outside. The world was twisting and turning, colors swirling in a way that felt wrong and frightening. I could barely make out the station platform, which looked even more deserted than the last. As the train slowed down, the shadows cast by the flickering lights seemed to writhe on the floor, almost alive. I took a step back as they reached toward me, stretching and curling like fingers. The name Fear's End echoed in my mind, a place where all dreams and hope seemed to fade away. The doors opened with a rush of cold air, but I hesitated. Did I really want to step outside? The shadowy figure I'd seen before seemed to loom larger, creeping closer to the open doors. I could feel its icy breath, like a whisper of darkness. Without thinking, I leapt outside, my feet landing on the cold, cracked floor of the platform. It was darker here than on the train, and the air felt thick and heavy. I glanced back to see the train doors shut behind me with an unnerving clink. "Wait! Don't leave me!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness. I turned around, looking for something, anything, that made sense. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone. Shadows danced in the corners of my eyes, flitting between the broken benches and faded signs. My heart thumped loudly in my chest. I felt as if eyes were watching me from everywhere, judging and waiting. In the distance, I saw movement. A group of figures appeared, standing still as stone. They looked just like the passengers from the train, their faces just as blank. I shook my head, stepping back. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. But they didn't answer. Instead, they began to drift closer, their faces still hidden in darkness. I felt an urge to run, but my legs felt heavy like they were stuck in quicksand. Panic clawed at me, and I turned and sprinted down the platform, desperate for an escape. I dashed past flickering lights that swung above me like eerie pendulums. A fleeting thought flashed through my mind. What if this is all a dream? But the cold air and the ground beneath my feet felt too real. I rounded a corner and came face to face with an old ticket booth. With no other choice, I dashed inside and slammed the door. I could hear the figures behind me, shuffling and whispering in the dark. Peeking through the cracks, I could see the shapes moving closer. My heart raced with dread. Click, click, click. The sound echoed in the booth, sending chills down my spine. I turned to see the old ticket machine next to me whirring to life, lights flashing eerily. I couldn't make sense of it. What was happening? Suddenly, the shadows at the edges of the booth started to reach in through the cracks, creeping closer. "You can't stay here," a voice whispered, chilling me to the bone. I backed away, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. The booth lights began to flicker violently as the shadows writhed closer, almost tangible now. I needed to escape. Panic surged through me, and I flung the door open and bolted back onto the platform. The figures were still there. Their faces had morphed into hauntingly familiar shapes, like the people from my past, twisted and wrong. I could barely breathe. The world felt heavy, as if gravity itself was pulling me down into the shadows. Just then, a loud screech pierced the air, sending a jolt of fear through me. The lights flickered out again, plunging me into startling darkness. I ran blindly, my feet pounding against the concrete. I could hear whispers swirling around me, words I couldn't comprehend, a cacophony of confusion. The walls began to close in, narrowing my path. Then I saw it, a flicker of light in the distance. Hoping it might be my way out, I ran towards it. Each step felt more labored than the last, as if my legs were weighed down with chains. I stumbled forward, lunging at the light, which danced tauntingly away from me. I reached the edge of a thick mist. The warmth of the light beckoned, yet dread filled my heart. The whispers became screams, urging me to stop, but I pressed on. As I stepped through the mist, I was thrust into a different world. It was bright here, but an unsettling brightness that hurt my eyes. I could hear laughter, childlike and innocent, but it echoed strangely, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Suddenly, shadows darted past me, twisting into grotesque shapes that made me cringe. I looked around, my heart racing. Could this really be the end? Help me! I screamed out, but my voice was lost in the laughter that echoed all around. Everything felt wrong, as if I had stepped into a nightmare. And then, I felt something brushing against me, cold fingers tracing my arm. I spun around, only to find a child standing behind me. But the child's eyes were empty, devoid of any light. "Join us," the child said, its voice soft yet chilling. "No," I shouted, backing away. But the words were drowned out by the laughter that grew louder, the shadows swirling around me. I was trapped in this strange place, battling against the unseen forces that held me. The light shimmered in front of me, but dark figures swarmed closer, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. In that moment of despair, I spotted a door in the distance, slightly ajar. Hope ignited within me. I turned and ran, my heart pounding louder than ever. As I dashed toward the door, I could hear the whispers calling my name, pulling me back, trying to drag me into the shadows. I burst through the door, slamming it behind me, gasping for breath. But instead of escape, I found myself in another vortex of swirling mist, the air thick with confusion. "Let me out!" I cried, but there was no answer, only the rising fear that I might never escape. I ran forward, searching for another way out, knowing the shadows were hot on my heels. But just as it seemed hopeless, I saw a reflection in the mist, my own face, twisted and hollow, staring back at me. I gasped, aghast at the sight. It felt like a warning, but what did it mean? Then, without warning, darkness wrapped around me like a shroud. I was trapped in a whirlwind, tossed between the realms of light and shadow. All I could hear were the whispers, louder than ever, wrapping around my thoughts. "Stay with us," they said. "You can never leave." I willed myself to fight back, clinging to the hope that I could escape this nightmare. The weight of despair felt heavy, but I raised my voice, shouting against the tide. "No, I will not stay." The shadows recoiled. I willed myself to fight back, clinging to the hope that I could escape this nightmare. The weight of despair felt heavy, but I raised my voice, shouting against the tide. "No, I will not stay." The shadows recoiled at my shout, as if my voice had cut through their darkness. For a moment, I felt a flicker of power, a glimmer of light that sent the creeping dread back for just a second. But they didn't stay away for long. The black mist started swirling around me again, thickening like a fog that choked the air. I took off running once more, my shoes pounding against an invisible floor beneath a weightless sky. Each step I took felt more like a leap into an abyss, an empty void where no light dared to shine. As the swirling mist enveloped me, shapes began to form, twisted and threatening, reaching out as if they wanted me to join their haunted dance. I pressed onward, my heart beating so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. In the distance, I spotted flickering lights again, but this time they felt sinister, like traps waiting to ensnare me. The laughter I heard earlier returned, but it was different now. It was sharp, almost mocking, echoing through the endless darkness. With each passing moment, the laughter grew more intense, drowning out my thoughts and filling my mind with confusion. I couldn't tell where I was, what was real anymore. It was as if the very ground beneath my feet was shifting, making me dizzy. I spotted what looked like an old clock tower, rising from the mist ahead. The clock's face was cracked and broken, its hand stuck at midnight. The bells, however, rang out in a deep, haunting toll that resonated through my chest. Each chime was like a countdown, making my heart race faster and faster. Feeling drawn to the tower, I pushed forward, desperate to find some kind of refuge. As I neared the entrance, I could see shadows moving through the cracked windows, flitting back and forth, their shapes flickering like flame. They seemed to dance to the toll of the bells, their movements a macabre ballet of despair. Gathering what little courage I had, I pushed the heavy door open. It creaked loudly, sounding like a scream against the silence that followed. The interior was dark, but I could make out a winding staircase spiraling upward, its steps worn and covered in dust. With nowhere else to go, I stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind me with an echo that made me jump. I moved cautiously up the steps, the air growing colder with each rise. A chill ran down my spine as I imagined the shadows creeping behind me, their whispered secrets following close on my heels. As I climbed higher, I heard a child's laughing voice echoing down the stairwell. "Come play with us," it called, sweet and innocent yet dripping with something sinister. I shivered, every instinct telling me to flee from this place. Yet a strange pull drew me closer. Reaching the top, I pushed open a door that led into a large room filled with dust-covered furniture. The walls were lined with portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow me. Inside the portraits, their faces were disto, root like funhouse mirrors, twisted into expressions of fear and longing. In the center of the room stood a table with a single candle flickering ominously. I approached it cautiously, my heart racing as I felt the shadows closing in again. The candle's light danced wildly, but there was something else on the table, a small, battered music box. I picked it up, hesitating as I felt a cold shiver run down my arm. It was heavy, almost pulsating with a life of its own. Gritting my teeth, I opened it. The music began to play softly at first, a sweet lullaby that twisted in my mind as I listened. But as the music picked up, the notes turned into screaming sounds, echoing the laughter of the children I heard earlier. "Join us," they called again, the voices mingling into a chaotic chorus. I slammed the lid shut, my heart racing. The sound stopped, but the air grew thick and heavy, as if the room wanted to swallow me whole. Just then, the door behind me creaked open. I turned, and my blood ran cold. The figures from below crept in, their faces still blank, but now lit by the flickering candlelight. They moved in unison, like puppets on strings, gliding across the floor toward me. I backed away slowly, my breath hitching in my throat. The specters drew closer, whispers echoing in the chamber. "You belong to us," they breathed, words that made my skin crawl. I felt trapped, like an animal cornered by hunters. In a burst of adrenaline, I dashed for the window, throwing it open violently. The wind rushed in, howling like a beast. I climbed out onto the ledge, the ground far below looking dark and uninviting. I had to keep moving, had to find a way out of this nightmare. As I balanced precariously, the figures below began to chant, their voices layered together. "You cannot escape." The air felt charged with energy, and I clutched onto the ledge desperately, my fingers losing strength. With a final push, I leapt off the ledge, closing my eyes as I fell into the darkness. I hit the ground hard, but bounced back up. The ground was soft, as if I had landed on a thick layer of fog that wrapped around me, whispering my name. I stood up and looked around, but everything was silent now. The laughter and the chanting had faded away. I didn't know where I was, but I felt the tension ease just a little. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, completely aware that the shadows could come for me at any moment. As I walked, the mist parted to reveal an empty street lit by a soft, eerie glow. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, darting away whenever I turned my head. I clutched my bag close to my chest, warily moving down the street, feeling eyes on me. The buildings were crumbling and old, like forgotten memories left to rot. They loomed ominously, their windows broken and dark. I couldn't help but think how strange this place felt, like a warped version of my own world. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement in one of the buildings. Something was watching me. A figure pressed against the shattered window. I took a hesitant step closer, squinting to see, and gasped when I realized it was the face of a man, gaunt and pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Help me," he mouthed silently, pressing his hands against the glass. I reached out to him instinctively, but stopped short, feeling the shadows creeping around me again. I didn't want to be drawn into that trap, whatever it was. With a shudder, I turned away and hurried down the street, feeling the panic rise again. I dashed from one crumbling building to the next, searching for anything that could lead me out of this eerie place. Panic thoughts ran through my mind. What happened to the train? Where was I? Would I ever find my way back? Up ahead, I saw a flicker of light in the distance, a small lantern swinging gently, illuminating a path through the mist. My heart leaped with hope. I ran toward it, pushing through the creeping shadows that threatened to close in around me. The lantern swung from the door of a small shack hidden among the ruins. I could feel a pull toward it, the air around it feeling charged with a strange energy. I reached for the door handle, feeling nervous but determined. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. The light was warm and inviting. Inside, it was filled with dusty old books and strange artifacts that seemed to hum with energy. An old woman with a gentle smile sat in a rocking chair, reading by the light of another flickering candle. "Welcome, dear," she said softly, her voice soothing yet filled with an unexplainable wisdom. "I've been waiting for you." I felt a mix of fear and comfort as the shadows danced around me. They seemed to shrink at the entrance of the shack as I stepped closer to the woman. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How did I get here?" "This is a sanctuary," she replied, her eyes bright and understanding. "But the shadows will come for you. They seek to claim you." I gasped, suddenly feeling the weight of panic settle in my chest. "What do I do?" "You must face them," she said, her tone calm yet firm. "You cannot run forever. Find the heart of the shadow, and you will understand." With that, the room grew cold, and the shadows rushed in through the door. I turned, heart racing, the darkness swirling all around me. The woman stood up slowly, the candles flickering as she lifted her hands. "Remember," she said, as the darkness enveloped me once more, "you are stronger than you know." And just like that, I was plunged back into the chaos. The whispers grew louder, the figures returning, voices clawing at my mind. Every dark thought surged forward, asking why I was still fighting, why I didn't just give in. But I steeled myself, feeling the weight of fear threatening to take over. I screamed back at the voices, "I will not let you in." The shadows writhed around me, twisting and turning, trying to pull me into their depths. I felt the cold fingers grazing my skin, but I pushed forward, more determined than ever to find the heart of the shadow and escape this nightmare. I saw a glimmer of light in the distance, a beacon through the chaos. The shadows tumbled and swirled behind me, trying to catch me as I raced toward the light. It felt like a promise, a hope that I could break free, and I threw all my strength into pushing forward. With every step, I could feel the darkness closing in, but I refused to give in. The laughter rose again, piercing and cruel, but my resolve only hardened. I was going to finish this once and for all. The light grew brighter as I approached it, a swirling mass of brightness that felt warm and inviting. I could feel the shadows falling back, recoiling away from the glow. Whatever was at its center, it was something I needed to confront. As I stepped inside the light, I was surrounded by a whirlwind of colors and feelings, confusion, fear, anger, but also hope and determination. I closed my eyes and concentrated, focusing on the shadows that had haunted me from the start. I opened my eyes to a stunning world, bright and full of life. The shadows were reduced to mere wisps at the edge of this new reality, barely visible, like memories fading away. I gasped at the scene around me. There were people filled with laughter, joy, and warmth standing in this vibrant world. They looked familiar, faces that once brought me comfort. My heart swelled as I stepped further into the light, embracing the feeling of belonging. But suddenly, the shadows surged forward again, stronger than before, roaring to reclaim what was theirs. I felt a rush of fear, but I remembered the woman's words. I was strong. With a surge of will, I called out to the shadows, "You are not me. You do not own me." The words erupted from my lips, and the shadows weaved toward me like a dark storm. This time, I stood my ground, letting my light shine brighter. In that moment, I truly felt the strength within me. I focused on the light, amplifying it with every ounce of determination I had. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing, trying to pull back but powerless in the presence of my light. Finally, with a wave of energy, I unleashed all my fear, pain, and doubt into the void. They vanished into the light, evaporating like mist under the sun. The shadows screamed one final time before they were consumed, reduced to nothingness as the light surged and filled the space around me. With a final pulse, I found myself standing alone. The light enveloped me, wrapping me in warmth and solace. I had faced my fears, confronted the darkness within, and now I was free. It was then that I understood. Though I may encounter shadows again, I now held the power to overcome them. As the brightness faded, I looked around. I was back at the original train station, standing where I'd started. The world felt normal again. People walked by, smiling and chatting, the sound of trains arriving and departing echoing around me. I felt heavy with emotion. I had journeyed through darkness and fear, but now I knew my strength. I smiled softly and stepped onto the platform. I was no longer afraid of where the train would take me. I was ready for whatever came next, because I knew I had the light within me to face it all. As I boarded the next train, I let go of the darkness and embraced I was no longer afraid of where the train would take me. I was ready for whatever came next, because I knew I had the light within me to face it all. But as I settled into my seat, something eerie settled in my stomach. The train jolted to life, and I felt the familiar rocking motion as it rolled away from the station. Yet, the air felt different now, heavier, charged with an unsettling energy. Glancing out the window, I noticed the landscape quickly shifting. The bright scenery warped into dark and twisted shapes, trees that looked like gnarled hands reaching for the sky, and shadows flitting past the corners of my eye. I was drawn in, the outside world almost mesmerizing. A chill danced up my spine. Remembering the woman's warning, I knew that darkness had a way of creeping back in, even when I felt safe. I took a shaky breath and leaned back, trying to push away the anxious feeling digging deeper inside. Around me, other passengers chatted softly, their faces oddly blank, as if they were all deep in thought, unaware of what I felt. Suddenly, the lights flickered above. I glanced up, seeing them swing sickeningly, like they were trying to escape the ceiling. I felt a wave of dread wash over me, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. Then, without warning, the lights went out completely, plunging the car into darkness. Panic surged through my veins. I could hear the whispers return, faint but growing in intensity. The sound curled around me, and I felt my heart race. "Join us," they called again, echoing through the void like a haunting lullaby. With the darkness swallowing everything, I scrunched into my seat, searching for any sign of light. Just then, the dim emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the car, and I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The other passengers were no longer relaxed. Their faces were now twisted in expressions of horror. They turned toward me, as if they could sense my fear, their mouths moving but no sound coming out. I wanted to scream, to break free, but I was rooted in place, unable to turn away from their vacant eyes staring right at me. In the corner of the train, the shadows thickened. I saw the edges of them curling together, forming a darker shape, a figure emerging from the mist. My heart pounded violently in my chest as I realized the figure was one of the creatures from the clock tower, distorted and ghastly. It advanced slowly, dragging its long fingers across the seats as it moved, leaving streaks of black darkness that weighed down the air. I could feel its gaze on me, piercing right through. I wanted to avert my eyes, but some unearthly force drew me in, forcing me to look closer. The creature whispered my name in a voice that was both familiar and terrifying. "You thought you could escape." The words slithered through the air like smoke, filling the space with an unsettling chill. My skin prickled, every hair on my body standing on end. I felt trapped, cornered on all sides. The whispers grew louder, pooling together into a chorus that rose and fell like the tide, swelling around me. "Stay with us," they beckoned, and I could feel the energy of their call pulling at my mind. Just then, the emergency lights flickered again, and I saw the other passengers rise in unison, their blank expressions shifting. They began moving towards me, their arms reaching out like marionettes on strings, pulling closer, inch by agonizing inch. I had to do something quickly. I pushed down the rising terror inside me. I stood up, shouting, "Get away from me!" The sound pierced through the overwhelming noise, halting the movements for just a moment. I caught sight of their faces contorting in confusion, and I took the chance to rush toward the exit. But the train had begun accelerating, the lights above flickering harshly, creating a disorienting strobe effect. I stumbled down the aisle, slipping past the petrified figures, hearts pounding in rhythm with the charging train. With the din of darkness crashing around me, I finally reached the door, desperately pulling on the handle. It wouldn't budge. The creature laughed then, a sound more chilling than the whispers, high and mocking. "You really think you can escape? This journey isn't over." Fear seeped into my bones. As I turned back, more shadows had come to life, swirling around the figures, wrapping around them like smoke. They were turning into faceless monsters, their forms shifting and collapsing, and I felt the weight of despair closing in again. I banged on the door, panic clawing at my throat. "Let me out!" I screamed, my voice lost in the chaos. The temperature in the train dropped drastically, and I could feel my breath coming out in shaky clouds. "To stay is to be free," whispered the creature, its voice now echoing in my head. "You're almost one of us." "No," I shouted back, shaking my head violently as I fought to drown it out. I couldn't let it win. The last remnants of brightness glimmered faintly in my mind, urging me to fight. I plunged down into my memories, recalling all I had faced, all I had fought through already. I remembered the woman in the shack, her words echoing like a torch in the darkness. I could do this. I was more than these shadows, focused and fueled with purpose. I pounded on the door again, feeling my determination surge. I felt the pull of the darkness behind me, but I let the light within me expand, pouring it out like a beacon. I shouted, "This ends now." My voice rang clear, bouncing through the darkened train cabin, igniting a spark of hope within me. The shadows flinched, twisting and writhing, momentarily disoriented by my fierce determination. With a final effort, I yanked the door handle. This time, it gave way. The door flung open, a rush of cold air sweeping in, fingers of dark mist retreating before the light spilling from outside. Taking a deep breath, I leapt forward into the unknown, leaving the shadows behind, feeling an exhilarating mixture of fear and freedom. The darkness swirled behind me as the train continued racing onward, its eerie whispers fading into the distance. As I landed outside, the world around me shifted and changed in an instant. I was thrown onto a spectral platform, bathed in soft moonlight, where strange figures moved about, their forms blurred, indistinct. I could feel an otherworldly presence here, something ancient and powerful. Each step I took was on the brink of a different reality, each path intertwined with shadows that beckoned me to turn back. I willed myself not to look, not to falter. Voices whispered from the shadows, familiar and unsettling. "You cannot escape us." In the distance, I noticed a flickering light, a small lantern, its warmth calling to me. It was like a promise, something solid in the swirling chaos. I sprinted toward it, ignoring the pull of the shadows that danced close behind. As I approached, the lantern revealed a small gathering of people, their faces strangely familiar but hollow and distorted. Just like the passengers on the train, they turned to me in unison, lips curling into eerie smiles that deepened the growing dread in my stomach. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice steady but trembling deep inside. "Join us," they harmonized, their eyes glimmering with a chilling hunger. "We are waiting." The lantern flickered ominously, casting long shadows that threatened to swallow me whole. I felt the darkness creeping closer, wrapping around my legs like chains, struggling to hold me back. I had to break free. Just then, I caught sight of a way out, a path leading back into the thick mist that surrounded the platform. It felt instinctual to turn and run, to escape the grips of the hollow faces and the lantern's ominous glow. I dashed down the path, pushing through the mist that enveloped me, feeling the humidity cling to my skin. As I ran, I could hear the whispers rising again, rising to a feverish pitch. The laughter echoed, pulsing in my ears like a steady heartbeat, urging me to look back, to join them just for a moment. But I refused, focusing on the promise of light ahead. My heart raced, pounding against my chest as I plunged deeper into the unknown. The air crackled around me, the shadows swirling more intensely, but I knew I had the strength to break free from this terrifying grip. With every step, I felt the shadows retreating, the laughter fading into a breathless whisper. I could feel the light drawing closer, a blinding beacon of clarity that illuminated my path. I pressed on, pushing through until I burst out of the mist and into a bright clearing, finding myself alone under a vast sky dotted with stars. The silhouettes of trees framed the scene, their gentle rustling a calming contrast to the chaos I had just escaped. I took a deep breath, leaning against a tree for support. The air was fresh, crisp, and filled with tranquility. But then something flickered in my vision, shadows darting at the edges. The darkness had not vanished entirely. It lingered, waiting in the darkness. In that moment of clarity, I realized that this was not the end. I had escaped one layer of fear, but I would have to face the shadows again. They were a part of me now, a manifestation of my deepest fears and struggles. Determined, I stood up straight, ready to confront whatever came next. No longer would I be consumed by fear. I would rise above it. I would learn to wield my light like a weapon against the encroaching dark, and I would not allow it to reclaim me. The journey was far from over, and as I stepped away from the tree, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. No longer would I be consumed by fear. I would rise above it. I would learn to wield my light like a weapon against the encroaching dark, and I would not allow it to reclaim me. But as I took my first few steps forward, the ground beneath me seemed to shift. The soft earth turned to a hard, rocky path and shadows appeared, stretching out like fingers toward me. The air turned cold again, and I could feel my breath hitch in my throat. I glanced around, trying to steady my racing heart, but every direction was enveloped in darkness. The trees loomed tall, branches twisting into grotesque shapes that looked like claws ready to reach out and snatch me away. I drifted deeper into the woods. Each crunch of gravel beneath my feet seemed louder, echoing in the silence. A terrible thought gripped me. What if I wasn't alone here? My instinct screamed for me to turn back, but curiosity drove me forward. The shadows shifted, whispering secrets that echoed through the trees. They called my name again, voices soft and haunting. "Come closer. We miss you." I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block out the sounds that twisted my thoughts. The whispers became sharper, more urgent. "You belong with us now," they insisted, swirling around like a tempest. I felt dizzy, the ground tilting beneath my feet. Out of the haze, I noticed something moving between the trees, a dark figure gliding just out of sight. It stopped for a moment, its outline flickering like a faulty light bulb, then vanished into the shadows again. I hesitated, heart racing. Was it really there, or had the darkness played tricks on my mind? I took a few cautious steps forward, peering into the oppressive gloom, but nothing revealed itself. Just the rustle of the wind through the leaves, a taunting reminder of the calm before whatever it was lurking just beyond my vision. I could feel the air grow denser, as if a storm was brewing. Then, a chilling laugh echoed from somewhere deep in the woods. It was high-pitched and full of mockery, sending shivers down my spine. "You think you can escape us?" it asked, the sound bouncing off the trees. I froze, a cold sweat running down my back. A dreadful realization sank in. Whatever was watching me was closing in. I turned on my heel and bolted down the rocky path, adrenaline surging as my heart pounded in my chest. The laughter rang out again, following me like a shadow, echoing louder with every step. I could feel the darkness press upon me, breathing down my neck as I ran. Branches snagged my clothes as I darted past them, tearing at my skin. I could hear a soft, chilling breeze that sounded like voices whispering, "Stay with us, stay." The shadows seemed to swarm around my feet, trying to drag me down, pulling me toward the earth, toward the things hidden below. I stumbled, catching myself just in time, and pressing on. I needed to find a way out. I hadn't come this far to be trapped again. My eyes scanned the environment, searching for a sign of escape, but the trees just stood like ancient sentinels, blocking my path. Then I saw a flicker of light in the distance, shimmering through the dark. It beckoned me, a moth drawn to the flame. I pushed forward, my legs burning with effort. The laughter faded briefly, competing with the crushing silence of the woods, and I felt a glimmer of hope. But as I drew closer, an abrupt silence fell, the air thickening, pressing against me. The light turned skewed and twisted, revealing a hollow space in the heart of the woods, a clearing that felt alive, breathing, as though the darkness itself swirled and danced around it. Stepping into the clearing felt wrong, like crossing an unseen boundary. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows danced eagerly at the edges, their anticipation palpable. Something was waiting just beyond the light, and it filled me with dread. In the center of the clearing was an old stone well, its mouth wide and dark. Chills ran down my spine as I approached slowly, heart pounding. I felt drawn to it, like it was calling to me. The air around it shimmered with an unnatural glow, deep shadows pooling at its edge. I peered into the abyss. The well seemed endless, a yawning void that sucked in the light and held it captive. The shadows whispered again, this time clearer, swirling around me like fog. "Look deeper. What do you see?" The words wrapped around my mind, and I felt my breath quicken. I leaned closer, trying to make out what lay within, when the flicker of movement caught my eye. Something was stirring in the darkness below. Panic flared up inside me, hands gripping the sides of the well as I struggled to back away. But the shadows surged forward, pulling me closer to the edge. I felt them wrap around my legs, tugging me down as icy fingers brushed against my skin. The laughter returned, louder and more maddening this time, mingling with the echoes of voices that whispered terrible secrets, dragging me closer and closer to the darkness. "What do you want?" I shouted, but my voice felt fragile and weak against the mounting chaos. The darkness rippled, responding like a living thing, and suddenly, all I could see were faces twisted in despair, pleading from the depths. They reached out toward me, their expressions shifting between pain and hunger. I recognized them, people I had once known, lost to shadows, just like the ones chasing me now. Their cries clawed at my heart. "Save us," they begged, merging with the night, voices drawing me in. I fought against the growing terror, struggling against the grasping shadows that tried to pull me deeper into the abyss. "No," I screamed, fighting with every ounce of energy. "I won't join you," feeling the weight of their longing. I remembered the light inside me, the strength I had fought so hard to discover. I gathered it, envisioning it bright and fierce, and with a roar of defiance, I pushed my hand forward, shouting, "I am stronger than this." The shadows screeched, their hold weakening for a moment. The light exploded from my palm, illuminating the darkness like a brilliant sun, scattering the shadows that desperately recoiled. The faces vanished, replaced by the frantic swirling darkness, frantically retreating from the glow that filled the clearing. As the shadows shrunk away, I turned to escape the chilling well, gasping for breath. I dashed out of the clearing, pumping my legs, not daring to look back. I wasn't free yet, but I could feel my strength growing with each step. The laughter waned, becoming mere echoes as I plunged deeper into the woods, fighting against the fear clawing at my mind. With every heartbeat, I felt lighter, the darkness behind me becoming more distant, like a bad dream fading with the dawn. Yet, even in my victory, I could still sense the lingering presence of the shadows. They were not gone, just pushed away for now. I could feel their dark longing trailing behind me like a cold breath. It wouldn't be long before they returned. The trees thinned as I ran, revealing a distant glow of a cabin, much like the one I had seen before. A part of me shouted to go inside and find safety, but the other half warned me of what else might be lurking there. Still, it was the only way forward. I approached cautiously, heart hammering in my chest as the lanterns swayed gently from the porch. The flickering light flickered warmly against the encroaching dark that still lingered in the air. I wanted to believe it was a refuge, but unease crept back and like an unwelcome guest. As I stepped onto the wooden porch, the board squeaked under my weight, and I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time, and just as I was about to turn away, the door creaked open. Inside, the shadows seemed to coalesce into forms once more, twisted shapes lurking in the corners, momentary glimpses of frightening figures that melted away when I looked closer. My heart raced, uncertainty buzzing around me like angry bees. The air was thick with silent caution, and I stepped inside slowly, ready for what awaited me. "Welcome," a voice echoed softly through the cabin, distant and warped. I turned to face an old man sitting in a large chair by a fireplace that had long since gone cold. His eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, and I felt a deep dread settle in my gut. He studied me with a knowing gaze, as if he could see every fear I had carried with me. "You have come seeking safety, but darkness is not easily left behind," he said, his voice a low rumble. "They will follow you." "What do I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "How do I get rid of them?" He motioned for me to sit, and the shadows seemed to shift, momentarily revealing eerie faces that flickered in and out of view on the walls. "To face them is to understand your own darkness," he said, voice heavy with experience. "But be warned, the path lays bare the things you truly fear." As I sat down, the shadows outside began to swirl heavily, their whispers once again rising, filling the cabin with a chilling hum. The old man leaned closer, eyes locked onto mine. "You must confront the origin of your fears alone." Those words sent shivers through me, and my body tensed. I felt every shadow pressing against the walls, ready to rush in, ready to consume me. My heart raced again, louder than before. "Alone," I repeated, dread pooling in my stomach. "Yes," he replied, deepening the unease. "But remember, light always fights back." Before I could gather my thoughts, the door slammed shut, and the old man vanished into thin air. The shadows darkened, swirling thicker, pushing against my skin, wrapping tighter. I felt their fingers clawing at my mind, tugging me toward a yawning chasm of despair. Do I run? Do I fight? My heart hammering, I realized I only had one choice. I took a deep breath and stood up, mustering the strength that had served me thus far. Whatever lay beyond this door, I would face it. I would find the source of my fears and confront it head-on. With unyielding determination, I threw open the door, stepping into the overwhelming darkness just beyond. Every hair on my body stood on end as the shadows surged forward, whispering my name in a maddening chorus. Come back, come back." But I pressed forward, stepping headlong into the night. With each step further into the dark, I braced myself, knowing something frightening awaited. I could feel the invisible eyes watching me, waiting for me to falter. But I refused. I would not be drawn into the depths of despair. As the darkness thickened, I could almost taste the fear hanging in the air. I felt it wrapping around me like a shroud, whispering haunting things, drawing deeper into the night. Yet, the light within me burned bright, fighting against the palpable dread that clawed at my soul. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself against the pulling shadows. I needed to find the source of this fear, to see the truth buried within the darkness. Whatever awaited, I would meet it head-on, with courage coursing through my veins. I took one final breath, clenching my fists, and stepped forward into the haunting unknown, knowing that I had a light within me strong enough to fight off the growing darkness, at least for now. As I walked into the thick mist, the chilling sensation of being watched intensified. The fog wrapped around me, tightening with every step. I felt the temperature drop, the air becoming thick and heavy, clinging to my skin like icy fingers. My heart thudded louder, echoing like a drum in my ears, drowning out the faint whispers surrounding me. Straining my eyes, I noticed the silhouettes shifting just beyond the mist. They moved just out of reach, darting in and out like shadows on the periphery, elusive and taunting. I could hear faint giggles, sing-song voices that twisted and turned on the edge of my consciousness. "Come play with us," they beckoned, sweet yet sinister. I hesitated, an icy lump forming in my throat. There was something off about those voices, a mix of innocence and terrible hunger. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed on, determined to find the source of this overwhelming fear buried deep within. As I moved deeper, I began to pick up on ghastly images forming in the mist. Flickers of memories danced around, moments from my past. I could see my childhood friends, laughing and running through a playground, but their faces morphed, twisting into grotesque versions, smiles widening into eerie grins. "We're still here," they hissed. "You can't leave us." My breath hitched as I stumbled backward, dread washing over me in waves. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the scene. It felt like a trap, a cruel joke played by the shadows. The laughter echoed and split into howls, piercing the silence and gnawing at my resolve. The fog thickened, pulling me in closer as I felt an invisible weight pressing against my chest. I could see shapes crawling at the edges of my vision, skeletal hands reaching out from the depths of the shadows, fingers curling in an unnatural way. They were hungry, desperate for something I couldn't understand but felt so deeply. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to look away, unwilling to be swayed. Then, ahead of me, I spotted a flickering light emerging from the clouds of darkness. My heart leaped with hope as I hurried toward it. It danced and swayed like a candle in the wind, a precious beacon cutting through the creeping dread. I quickened my pace, desperately wanting to grasp that light before it vanished. The closer I got, the more the light revealed itself. It was an old lantern hanging from a gnarled tree, the wood twisted like the roots of some ancient beast, and the glass was fogged and cracked. I reached out towards it, wondering who had left it there, when suddenly a gust of wind swept through the area. The whispers rose again, sharper and more demanding. "Join us, join us!" The shadows surged forward, swirling around the tree, the figures growing bolder. I could feel their desperation, their rage converging into a single horrifying mass, threatening to pull me back into the depths of despair. I took a step back, heart racing. "What do you want?" I shouted, frustration mingling with fear. "I don't belong here." The laughter erupted, a cacophony of twisted delight, curling around the light like smoke. From within the shadows, a figure emerged. It moved with a fluidity that made my skin crawl. It was a dark shape, tall and twisted, its features obscured but glinting with malevolence. Its eyes gleamed in the dark, two pinpoints of light that bore into my very soul. "You are one of us now," it whispered, voice like gravel scraping against steel. "The darkness feels you." Terror shot through me. I stumbled backward as it reached out with long, shadowy fingers, extending toward me as if trying to claim me. I could feel the chill radiating from its outstretched hand, and instinct kicked in. I turned and ran. Branches scraped against my skin as I pushed deeper into the darkness, blindly fleeing from the figure, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The shadows chased me, wrapping around my legs, tugging at my clothes as I barreled through the forest. I felt their twisted laughter rising behind, urging me to stop, promising comfort if I would only relent. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't let them win. My heart thudded in my ears. and I forced my legs to move faster, racing away from the horror I knew lurked just behind. Just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I caught a glimpse of an eerie glow peeking through the trees. It drew me in like a moth to flame. As I approached, I realized it wasn't a gentle light, but a flickering fire burning on the ground, surrounded by a circle of stones. The flames twisted and curled in unpredictable patterns, casting ominous shadows all around. I felt an immediate sense of dread wash over me, but something deeper within called to me. This fire felt primal raw. I stepped cautiously closer, caught between the allure of the flame and the instinct to flee. The shadows danced at the edges of the firelight, their whispers turning into a growl. "Burn with us," they taunted. "Return to the darkness." A sudden gust blew through the clearing, extinguishing nearly half of the flames, plunging me into near darkness. Panic surged again, and I staggered back, ready to bolt. But then I realized I needed to confront my fears here and now. I took a trembling step forward, raising my hands toward the flickering light. "No," I shouted, voice wavering with intensity. "You have no power over me." My words filled the air, reverberating through the swirling shadows. The fire responded. Sparks erupted, crackling, and the flames shot higher, casting away the shadows momentarily. I stared in awe. The silhouettes shrank back, howling in fury as I felt the warmth envelop me. The flickering light ignited something within, pushing against the dark that wanted to consume me. The glow brightened, revealing more of the clearing as I summoned every ounce of courage. I breathed deeply, focusing on the warmth filling me, feeling a surge of strength. But the shadows didn't retreat for long. They regrouped, moving closer, anger boiling in the air. Suddenly, the heat of the fire intensified, shooting up brightly as shadowy figures began to take form again, their features twisting into torment. I stood my ground, clutching my fists as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Each movement they made felt like a ripple in the air around me, a dark warning. "Face us!" they shrieked, voices layered and chaotic, echoing within my skull. "Feel the fear you've buried deep." The shadows lunged forward, surrounding me in a whirl of chill and darkness. My body felt frozen, caught in the grip of both fear and fury. Yet, at that moment, I remembered the light that had guided me thus far. It was a part of me, stronger than any shadow. With a fierce shout, I pushed my hands outward, channeling the warmth and energy I had gathered, focusing it toward the advancing darkness. The air crackled as my light surged forth, bright and brilliant. The shadows reared back, howling in pain, their forms contorting as the flames exploded around me, becoming a barrier between me and the encroaching fear. I felt the space expanding, the weight lifting. Even as the darkness clawed at the outskirts of the light, I held firm. "You don't control me," I shouted into the chaos, each word fueled by my resolve. The darkness hissed, a sound of fury and frustration as the light swelled around me, forcing it back. "Fight it!" a voice echoed around me. It felt familiar yet foreign. "The shadows draw strength from your fear." I closed my eyes, pouring every ounce of emotion into my voice, pouring every ounce of strength into that luminous energy. I could feel the fear ebbing away, replaced by something fierce and primal. I was ready for this, ready to face whatever lay ahead. With grit, I opened my eyes to the encroaching dark. "I am here," I declared. "You will not take me." My voice rang out, defiant as the light flared, illuminating the entire clearing in a burst of brilliant radiance that swallowed the shadows. The howls of despair erupted as they dispersed under the brightness, retreating like a tide pulled back into the ocean. The shadows began to dissolve, fading into nothingness, revealing the clearing surrounded by trees bathed in moonlight. But the remnants of the shadows lingered still, their faint whispers brushing against my skin, a chilling reminder that the darkness was never far away. I stood in the glow of the fire, panting, heart racing, knowing this battle wasn't over. This was just a reprieve. As I took in the shattered remnants of the darkness, I stepped back, the fire flickering low. But I was ready. I understood now that this wasn't merely about survival. It was about embracing every part of myself, even the darkness. If I could control it, I could wield it. I had faced my fears and won this time. With resolve, I would keep fighting for the light, even if it meant facing the shadows again. I took a deep breath and stepped further into the clearing, determined to uncover the next challenge, trusting that the flicker of light inside would guide me. Just then, the shadows returned, slithering back like fog rolling over the ground. They came slowly at first, whispering sweet, deceitful words of comfort and familiarity. "You are never alone," they promised, their voices dripping with the syrupy sweetness of memories I almost recognized. "Come back to us, the darkness awaits." But I turned, facing the path I had come from, remembering the light I bore within. I would confront this sleep again, day after day, until the light was all that remained. I pressed forward, ignoring the beckoning calls, refusing to fall back into the clutches of darkness. As I left the clearing behind, I knew that every day would be marked by a struggle, but I could not and would not give in. The fire still glowed in my heart, and my journey had just begun, a path through a world where shadows danced and light flickered. But I would walk it firmly, fearlessly, knowing I had survived the worst. And so, I continued deeper into the unknown, one step at a time, each step pulling me toward destiny. The lurking shadows fading but never forgotten. The story was still unfolding, and I was determined to write it, even at the edge of darkness. The forest grew denser, trees creeping closer together as though conspiring against me. Their gnarled branches twisted up toward the sky, like skeletal fingers grasping at fading light. I felt a growing unease wrapping around me as I pushed deeper into the thicket, the sound of the leaves rustling and the wind resembling whispering voices. "Stay, stay," they seemed to call, tugging at my resolve. With every step, the earth beneath my feet softened, a thick layer of damp moss giving way, swallowing my footsteps. It felt wrong. Dread sunk in my stomach as I pressed on, my pulse quickening. The shadows swarmed back, twirling in my periphery, ghostly forms blending seamlessly with the dark background of the forest. I felt their presence close, brushing against my skin like a chilling breath, always just out of sight, taunting me. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing, a space that felt like a warped reflection of the previous one. There, in the center, lay a circle of stones arranged with ominous precision, slightly unnerving in their neatness. The air was electric, buzzing with a strange energy that made my hair stand on end. I stepped closer, drawn by an invisible thread, and noticed something in the center of the circle. It was a doll, tattered, old, and hauntingly lifelike. Its eyes, dark as night, seemed to follow me, pinning me in place. The doll wore a faded dress, its fabric frayed and torn. I could not shake the feeling that it had been placed there deliberately, a part of some dark ritual, a silent plea to the shadows around. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the thick silence. As I knelt down to inspect it, I felt a rush of cold air, chilling me to the bone. The leaves rustled louder, warning me to step back. But curiosity was stronger than fear, and I reached out toward the doll. As my fingers brushed against its cracked porcelain face, a sharp jolt flew through me, visions flooding my mind. I saw flashes of happiness intermingled with heart-wrenching sorrow. Laughter echoed, then quickly morphed into wails. The darkness around the doll thickened, swirling with sinister intent. I felt the pull of the shadows, creeping closer, whispering my name like a dark lullaby, promising to keep me safe if I just surrendered. "No," I shouted, pulling my hand back as the vision subsided. I staggered away from the circle, my heart racing. The shadows hissed at my rejection, their whispers turning to growls. "You can't escape," they echoed, a cruel reminder of my own vulnerability. "You'll never be free." The forest began to twist and shift, trees closing in around me, limbs reaching out as if to clutch me. I could feel the panic rising, gripping my throat like a vice. But I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't let the darkness win. I turned to run, the echoes of laughter and cries chasing after me. spiraling into a dreadful cacophony. My feet pounded against the mossy ground, but it felt like I was trapped in slow motion, the branches pulling at my clothes, tugging me back as I fought against their grasp. Just as I broke through the trees, a sharp pain shot through my ankle as I twisted to avoid a hefty root, sending me crashing to the ground. Laying there, breathless and defeated, I glanced back into the woods, the shadows swirling closer, hungry and restless. I could almost see their wicked smiles forming, a dark reality that taunted me for faltering. As I scrambled up, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of white in the distance. It was near the edge of the clearing where I had first entered, but it felt like a lifeline amidst the darkness. I rubbed at my ankle, the pain sharp, but I couldn't linger. Gripping my resolve, I forced myself to stand, the shadows clawing at my back as I limped toward the glimmer. Drawing closer, I could see it was a piece of fabric flowing in the wind, a tattered white handkerchief dancing on a branch, glowing faintly like a star lost in the night. As I reached for it, the air changed again. Something shifted like a storm brewing just outside my vision. The shadows coalesced behind me, closing in at a frightening speed as a low growl resonated in the air. I snatched the handkerchief, clutching it tightly in my hand as I felt a rush of warmth pulsing through me. It seemed to respond to my fear, igniting my courage. Suddenly, the shadows halted, a thick barrier holding them at bay as they thrashed and twisted, furious at being denied their prize. "Leave me alone," I yelled, my voice echoing through the clearing. "I refuse to be your prisoner." In that moment, the handkerchief burst to life, weaving bright threads of light snaking around me, creating an ethereal barrier of shimmering energy. I could feel the shadows recoil, a collective gasp of anger echoing through the woods as their bloody whispers turned frantic. They were losing ground, their once commanding presence now reduced to desperate movements, desperate to break through. But I knew darkness was patient. It waited and watched, waiting for the moment I might falter again. The realization washed over me, bringing clarity. I couldn't just run and hide. I had to confront it, face the darkness within and without. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fabric pulse against my skin. With newfound courage, I raised the handkerchief high above my head, my heart exploding with determination. "I am the light," I declared, voice steady despite the tremors of fear lingering in my chest. "You will not take me." The shadows writhed violently, swirling with rage as I stepped forward, fueled by the light that burned brighter in my chest. Clenching my fists around the fabric, I thrust it out toward the thrashing darkness, forcing it to confront the very thing it had hoped to extinguish. In that instant, the air crackled and shimmered like a summer storm, the energy bursting forth and illuminating the clearing in a brilliant array of colors. Particles of light, fragments of hope, exploded around me, piercing the shadows like daggers. I could feel their presence dissipating, cries of frustration echoing as they thrashed against the fierce illumination. I felt invincible in that moment, every shred of fear vanishing under the weight of determination and the power of the light. I stepped forward, repeating my words, tilting my chin up defiantly. "I will not be a part of your darkness. You do not own me." The shadows recoiled, twisting and churning, then vanished altogether, leaving me alone in the clearing, panting but resolute. As the last remnants of the dark dissipated like mist in the morning sun, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. But deep down, I knew this victory was just a momentary reprieve. I could still hear the whispers, lingering at the edge of my consciousness, promising that they would return. The fight was not over. I steeled my resolve, glancing down at the handkerchief glowing faintly in my grasp. It was a symbol of my strength, reminder that I could confront the darkness whenever it came. With newfound purpose, I turned and headed through the trees, knowing that whatever lay ahead, I would be ready. Stepping further into the unknown with my heart lit with determination, I promised myself I would find the source of this darkness and end it once and for all. Each challenge pulled me closer to uncovering the truth hiding in the shadows, and I wouldn't back down. The night felt heavy, but I pressed on, heart racing not with fear, but with the thrill of what was to come. Each rustle of leaves, each whisper of wind, promised a revelation waiting just beyond the horizon, a darkness full of secrets I was bound to face. I was not just a wanderer lost in the night anymore. I was the bearer of my light, and the shadows would tremble in my wake. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the ambience shifted around me. It became eerily quiet, the usual sounds of the forest fading away. No rustling leaves, no chirping crickets, only a suffocating silence enveloped me. Each step echoed in the stillness, and I felt the weight of eyes watching from the dark, hidden corners of the trees. I glanced around, the handkerchief still glowing softly in my hand, casting a warm light that felt comforting against the thick blanket of fear that pressed down on me. Yet the deeper I went, the darker it became. The trees grew denser, their trunks twisted and knotted, reaching out in ways that felt almost alive. Suddenly, a chill ran through the air. I shuddered, the temperature dropping sharply as an unnatural fog started to seep in. It slithered around my ankles, curling like a snake, pulling me down into its depths. I pressed on, each breath becoming more labored, a strange sense of dread creeping under my skin. Then, out of the fog, I spotted something strange on the ground, a collection of small, glassy orbs, each one reflecting my light, like tiny stars captured on Earth. I bent down, curiosity getting the better of me. As I reached out to touch one, my fingertips brushed against its surface, and a cold wave shot through me. Instantly, ghostly images flickered to life within the orb. Fleeting moments of joy swiftly turned into scenes of despair. I gasped, pulling back, my heart racing. I could see faces twisted in pain, mouths open in screams, their eyes hollow and haunted. It felt like these orbs contained the very essence of despair. Shadows swirled around them, feeding off the vibrations of their anguish. And before I knew it, I was engulfed in their cries. "Join us!" they echoed, a chorus of sorrow that made my skin crawl. "Feel the darkness, be a part of our suffering." My breath quickened, panic threatening to swallow me whole. I shook my head. "No, you can't have me," I shouted, trying to drown out the overwhelming grief that invaded my mind. The fog thickened, and suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled, roots creeping out of the earth like long, bony fingers, tangling around my legs, trying to pull me down. I fought back, tearing my foot free as I turned to run, desperation surging through my veins. But the faces in the orbs haunted me as I dashed away, their torment etched in my mind, mocking my attempts to escape. "You can't outrun your fears," they whispered, voices low and threatening. "We are always closer than you think." As I forged ahead, I caught sight of movement in the corner of my vision, dark figures flitting just outside the edges of my light, watching and waiting. My heart raced, trapped between terror and fury. With every moment, the shadows seemed to grow more bold, the orbs pulsing with a dark energy that beckoned them closer. I fought through the darkness, the air growing thicker, and the whispers became a cacophony that threatened to break my mind. It was overwhelming, the weight of despair suffocating, threatening to crush me under its weight. Then, I stumbled into another clearing, larger than before, but it felt wrong. In the center stood a cracked stone altar, covered in ancient glyphs that pulsed with a sickly green glow. The earth around it was brown and barren, as if all life had been drained away by the darkness. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the altar held a magnetic pull. I felt drawn toward it, a terrible curiosity clawing at my mind. As I approached, I noticed offerings placed atop the altar, decayed flowers, broken toys, and remnants of what looked like worn-out photographs. Each item seemed to radiate sorrow, whispering fragments of lost dreams. As I stepped closer, a gust of wind blew through the clearing, dragging a chill with it, carrying distant laughter that echoed like a memory slipping away. "Welcome," a voice said, soft yet dark, reverberating through the air. I spun around but saw no one. It felt like the ground beneath me shifted again, making my stomach churn. "We've been waiting for you," the voice coiled around me, nearly tangible. tugging me closer to the altar as I stumbled, my senses heightened, heart pounding. "No, this is wrong," I stammered, stepping back, scanning the darkness for signs of movement. But the shadows only grew thicker, enveloping me like a heavy cloak. Just then, I heard a faint giggle, unsettling and cruel, from behind the altar. My blood ran cold. Peering around the massive stone, I was met with a sight that froze me in place. It was a small figure, a girl, dressed in tattered clothes that blended seamlessly with the shadows. Her hair hung in tangled strands, and her wide, hollow eyes glimmered with an unsettling brightness. "Are you lost?" she asked, tilting her head. Her voice was sing-song, laced with something sinister. "Get away from me," I shouted, backing away instinctively. But she just smiled, a grin spreading across her face, revealing sharp, two white teeth. "You can't escape. They always come back," she said cryptically, her laughter echoing among the trees. The shadows seemed to swell at her words, and I felt them pushing in on me, suffocating the light, wrapping me in a shroud of fear. "Join us," she repeated, gesturing with a skeletal hand, inviting me into the gathering darkness. My heart raced, and I felt the urge to run, but my legs felt heavy, like they were rooted to the ground. Suddenly, the earth beneath me shook violently, and the clearing felt alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of something dark. The waves of energy surged, and I struggled against the power, trying to pull me down. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed. Clenching my fists around the handkerchief, I summoned every ounce of strength within me. "Leave me alone," I yelled, my voice breaking through the suffocating whispers, the darkness momentarily recoiling. The girl's grin faltered, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Such bravery," she hissed, her demeanor shifting dangerously as shadows shifted behind her, swirling like angry storm clouds. "But you can't outrun your fate." With that, the darkness surged forward, wrapping around me like tendrils of smoke, tightening and squeezing as I fought against its grip. Just as the shadowy mass closed in, I remembered the glowing handkerchief and the warmth it provided, swimming through my memories like a lifebuoy in a stormy sea. With a surge of determination, I thrust it into the dark. Light exploded from it, tearing through the shadows like a blade, illuminating the clearing with a blinding brilliance that forced the girl back, her laughter twisting into a howl of rage. I could almost feel the warmth of hope radiating from the cloth, pushing against the darkness, reminding me of all things light and good. "Get away," I commanded, stepping forward, the light expanding further, pushing the dark shadows back until they screamed in pain. The girl glared at me, her face twisting in fury, shadows dancing wildly around her. "You can't win," she spat. But the shadows were already disintegrating, fading into the light. As I forced the light outward, I noticed something peculiar in the remnants. The orbs still pulsed faintly, mere echoes of what they once contained. With a sudden burst of courage, I strode closer to the altar, refusing to let fear govern me any longer. "In the light, you are nothing," I shouted as I aimed the bright glow at the closest orb. It shattered like glass, releasing a wave of white energy that coursed through the air, cleansing the shadows surrounding it. I repeated the same for each orb, each one cracking and dispersing, unleashing the tortured spirits trapped within. With each shattered orb, the darkness screamed louder, their cries of anger mingling with wails of souls set free. The girl's form flickered unstable, fear unfolding on her face as she realized the shadows were losing their grip. "No, this isn't over," she shrieked, disappearing into a vortex of darkness as the last orb shattered. As silence settled back into the clearing, artifacts of despair and suffering crumbled into dust at the altar's feet. A sense of relief washed over me, but I knew in my heart this was only respite. The remnants of the darkness lingered, but I had discovered my own power. With the handkerchief glowing steadily, I took a deep breath, turned away from the altar, and stepped once more into the forest, determined to confront whatever horrors awaited me beyond the tree line. I was ready, fueled by the light within, and armed with the knowledge that I could fight back against any darkness that dared to approach. Yet, deep down, I felt the eerie sensation that the shadows had not been entirely vanquished. Each footstep I took echoed through the dense woods, a reminder that I was far from free. The night still held many mysteries, and I would discover them all, one looming challenge at a time. As I moved away from the altar, the air felt thick and heavy, like a suffocating blanket wrapping around me. Each breath tasted like ash, gritty on my tongue. In the distance, twisting shapes flickered just beyond my light, their forms shifting like smoke dancing in the moonlight. I couldn't tell if they were the remnants of the dark or something new. The weight of unseen eyes continued to follow me, making every hair on my body stand on end. With each step I took, I felt the ground shift beneath me, as if the forest itself was alive and aware of my presence. Roots cracked and snapped, rearranging like fingers stretching out to touch me. I had to keep moving, but the shadows danced closer, encroaching upon my light. I turned back, half expecting to see the girl or others from the dark looming behind me. But the clearing had fallen silent. The only sounds were my own shaky breaths and the thumping of my heart against my chest. Then, without warning, a low growl erupted from behind a thick bramble, sending a shiver down my spine. I paused to glance over, my pulse quickening. The bushes trembled, and I held my breath, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever lurked inside. Suddenly, it burst forth, a creature that looked like a mix between shadows and fur, its eyes glowing like embers. Panic enveloped me as the creature lunged, its jagged teeth bared. I barely moved in time, dodging to the side as it crashed to the ground, stirring leaves and dirt into the air. Its breath was rancid, smelling like decay, and I could feel my stomach churn at the thought of being caught. Desperately, I thought about the handkerchief. Would it work against this beast? Did I even have enough strength left? With no time to ponder, I sprang to my feet and started to run, branches clawing at my clothes as I wove through the trees. The sounds of pursuit followed me, a growl that echoed through the darkness, relentless and merciless. I could feel its presence close behind me, breath hot and heavy. I couldn't let it catch me. I had fought too hard to let it all end here. In my frantic escape, I stumbled upon a narrow path that I hadn't seen before, winding between the trees like a serpent. I didn't hesitate, darting down the unknown route, praying it would lead me away from the creature. The forest grew denser, shadows closing in like a closing fist, choking out the light from the handkerchief. Soon, I could hear the sound of wet footsteps splashing through underbrush behind me, a constant reminder that I was still being hunted. I pressed forward, feeling the warm glow of the handkerchief flicker as if reacting to my fear. I held it tighter and focused, willing it to shine brighter. Suddenly, the path opened into a clearing, but as I stepped into it, my heart sank. All around the edges of the clearing stood twisted trees, their branches contorted in unnatural ways. At the center, a well loomed, ancient stones covered in moss, looking dark and foreboding. The water's surface was eerily still, reflecting nothing but darkness. A whispered voice echoed from the well, soft yet insistent. "Come closer, child. Find the truth." It was a voice I felt I had heard before, luring and mocking all at once. The whispers seemed to wrap around me, beckoning me forward, pulling me closer. I hesitated, fear gripping my chest, but I couldn't turn back. The creature was still out there. Shaking, I stepped toward the well, peering into its depths. The darkness was deep, almost inviting in its stillness. I could swear I saw images swirling just below the surface, faces distorted in pain, lost souls trapped within. "Help us," they whispered, their voices all jumbled together, a haunting melody rising from the well. "Stop it," I shouted, holding the light out, but the darkness only thickened, pushing against my resolve. My heart raced. I felt like I was being sucked into a whirlpool of despair. The creature's growls interrupted the moment, drawing nearer with every passing second. I had to make a choice, and fast. Feeling the tension building, I aimed the handkerchief over the well, channeling all the light into it. "You don't own me," I screamed, and with a rush of adrenaline, I threw the handkerchief into the water. The surface exploded in a dazzling burst of light, illuminating the clearing like day. I felt the shadows retreating, repelled by the radiance. But as the light pierced the dark depths of the well, I became aware of the shadows lurking just beyond the reach of the glow, shifting and clawing at the air. Furious about the disturbance, their anger boiled over, and from the edges of the trees, faces emerged, shrieking in rage, a reckoning against the light that threatened to overcome them. They converged upon me as I turned to run, their anguished cries echoing in my ears. Each step I took sent tremors through the ground, the energy of the well mixing with the dark, creating a whirlwind of chaos. I could feel the air crackling with tension as I raced back the way I came, knowing that the creature was still in pursuit. But now the shadows were closing in on all sides. Panic surged through me, urging me to escape. I sprinted back into the darkness of the woods, desperately dodging branches and roots in a frantic bid for freedom. My mind raced with thoughts of how I could protect myself as the last remnants of the light faded behind me. I could hear the growling right behind me, closer than ever, and the wails from the well echoing in the almost hollow forest, reminding me of what was still at stake. With every ounce of fear and adrenaline, I pushed myself harder, weaving through the midnight trees. As I ran, I spotted flickers of light appearing in the branches above, strange orbs of glowing energy that pulsed softly, illuminating the darkness around me. They didn't fade away, but instead grew in number, forming a flickering path. I felt an instinctive pull toward them, like they were guiding me. Maybe they were my salvation or a deeper trap. Either way, I had to find out. I forced myself to follow them, even as the growl of the creature grew angrier behind me, echoing off the bark. The orbs danced in the air, creating a path of shimmering light that led deeper into the forest. I pushed myself beyond what I thought I could handle, feeling my legs burn, but the glowing orbs urged me on, each one a little beacon of hope guiding me through the encroaching blackness. Soon, I reached a hollow tree that glowed faintly with an otherworldly luminescence and felt something stir inside me, calling out. Without thinking, I dove into the hollow, the branches closing behind me like a protective barrier. Inside, the air felt different, charged with energy, almost electric in its warmth. My surroundings shifted, the shadows outside clawing at the opening as I sank to the ground, panting heavily. Here, I felt a strange comfort, a retreat from the chaos outside. Yet, even in the sanctuary of the tree, I could hear the creature's growl, a snarl full of rage and hunger. Even as I took a moment to collect my thoughts, I understood it wouldn't give up easily. It wanted me, and no shadows or walls could keep me safe from it forever. The growls faded for a moment, and I strained to hear if it had wandered off. But that brief silence was broken by a deep rumble from beneath me. I looked down in alarm as the ground shook, the roots writhing ominously around me. They creaked and groaned, roots stretching like limbs reaching for me. I scrambled backward, pressing against the damp earth, every instinct screaming to escape. The walls of the hollow tightened, closing in, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Then, with a sudden rush, tendrils of darkness shot through the cracks of the trunk, slithering toward me. I felt a surge of dread. The shadows from outside were seeping in, unhindered, hungry to reclaim what they had lost. They crawled through the opening, and I could sense their malicious energy enveloping me once again. In that moment, I felt the desperation clawing at my mind. I couldn't let it consume me. Swallowing my fear, I grasped the light from the handkerchief, willing it to shine again, pushing against the darkness encroaching on me, almost like a shield against the overwhelming sense of despair. The light surged forth, and I could feel a tremor run through the darkness, a moment of hesitation from the shadows recoiling in the sudden brightness. It was my chance. I focused my willpower and aimed the light at the darkness pooling around me. "You don't own me," I shouted again, pushing back against the sinister tendrils that curled toward me. As the light exploded outward, banishing the encroaching shadows, I felt the roots retracting, the evil at bay, retreating into its dark corners. But as I regained my sense of safety, The air shifted again, tense and ominous. I could hear a voice calling my name, faint, low, laced with promise and threat. "Come back to us." The voice echoed hauntingly. "You can't run forever." Chilled to the bone, I realized I was still far from safe. Even deep within this hollow retreat, the darkness still had a hold over me. No matter where I turned, it wanted me. It would always want me. Steeling my resolve, I prepared for whatever came next, knowing I had to summon every ounce of courage to face the truth behind the shadows lurking just beyond the edge of my sanity. What awaited me outside was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had to uncover the origins of the darkness, no matter the cost. And I wasn't going to let fear dictate me any longer. I would walk into the night again, but this time, I would be the one to confront the darkness, and I was ready to break its hold once and for all. I wasn't going to let fear dictate me any longer. I would walk into the night again, but this time, I would be the one to confront the darkness, and I was ready to break its hold once and for all. Taking a deep breath, I pushed myself from the hollow tree, feeling the warmth from the little light still flickering in my hand. The shadows outside seemed to simmer with anticipation, a silent crowd waiting for my next move. I had to step back into that dark realm, but this time, I wouldn't be seeking escape. I was searching for answers. As I stepped out, the night closed in around me like a heavy curtain. The air felt electric, buzzing with a sense of something looming just out of sight. Each footfall echoed in eerie silence, not a rustle of leaves or a hoot of an owl to be heard. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash between light and dark. I chose to follow the flickering orbs once more as they shimmered faintly in the branches above. They moved slowly, almost tauntingly, as if they knew I needed their guidance. I found myself drawn to the path they illuminated, the warm glow contrasting against the surrounding cold night. Moving deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching from the shadows, a chilling sensation creeping down my spine. The otherworldly glow led me to a clearing that felt like a forgotten place, where nature itself seemed wrong. The trees twisted into grotesque shapes, gnarled limbs reaching out like fingers desperate for something. Wet ground squelched beneath my feet, pulling at my shoes as I moved. The air here tasted of iron, thick and cloying, filling my lungs with dread. Suddenly, a low whisper rustled through the leaves, carrying my name as if it were a chilling melody. "Come play with us." The voice sounded deceptive, eerily sweet, luring me closer. But I knew better now. I steeled myself, cutting through the shadows with the light, determined not to be swept away by the sinister invitation. But the clearing began to shift and quake around me. The ground trembled, and from the depths, figures started to emerge, sickly pale and emaciated, their eyes sunken and hollow. They moved as if underwater, gliding toward me with an unnatural grace, their fingers stretched and claw-like. I fought the urge to scream, but kept my grip on the light steady. "Let us in." They moaned in unison, voices blending into a horrifying symphony. "We've been waiting for someone like you." Each word twisted inside me, filling me with despair. Each figure had echoes of those I had seen in the orb's depths, suffering souls entangled in darkness, yearning for release. They drew closer, their insatiable hunger for connection palpable. I forced myself to stand firm, feeling the handkerchief's warmth pulsing in my grasp. It flickered, responding to my fear, almost urging me to unleash its power. "No!" I shouted, pushing the light forward. "You can't have me." The figures recoiled momentarily, shadows edging back, but then they moved as one, a rush of despair and rage. The trees creaked ominously, and I noticed the branches wobbled as if they wanted to intertwine with the figures, aiding them in their approach. The atmosphere felt thick with malice, and I could only think of escape. Desperately, I turned back to the glowing orbs hovering just above me. They seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, a lifeline through the nightmarish scene. I focused on them, willing them to guide me further. As I did, I caught glimpses of the figures' once happy faces, now twisted in desperation, memories of joy stolen by the encroaching shadows. Could I save them, or would I become one of them? Suddenly, the very ground shifted again, revealing a narrow fissure that cracked across the clearing. The figures stumbled, caught off guard, their expressions morphing from greed to panic. "Help us!" they wailed, their voices rising in a cacophony of madness, filling the air with unsettling echoes. Water pooled at the fissure's edge, thick and dark, swirling ominously. The fissure seemed alive, beckoning me closer with a gurgling sound, drawing the dark figures toward its depths. An unease settled deep in my stomach, warning me that the well was no ordinary shadowy abyss. Something was waiting beneath that surface, something worse than any specter, lurking in its depths. I couldn't let the figures pull me under their spell. I took my chance, bolting away from the growing fissure. The light in my hand pulsed furiously, casting sharp beams through the darkness. I could see more shapes lurking between the trees, more victims drawn into the shadows, eyes glinting with longing. I felt a deep sadness wash over me, knowing each of them must have once been innocent. The forest began to close back in, branches reaching toward me, and the shadows clawing at my heels. As I raced through the chaotic scene, I realized I needed to confront whatever dark force had claimed these souls. I had to. This was not just a fight for my safety, but a chance to confront the darkness that kept reaching, pulling at everything it desired. The light guided me along the twisted path, weaving between the trees like a flame amidst a dark thicket. With each step, I could see the ground shifting beneath me, roots snapping out of the earth, searching for a way to latch onto me, reclaiming what they had lost. I pressed on, refusing to let fear consume me as I came upon another clearing. But this place felt different. Instead of shadows, there was a sickly luminescence hanging in the air, a soft glow that pulsed unnaturally. I stepped tentatively into the clearing and gasped. In the center, a mound of darkened, rotting leaves spiraled skyward, and upon it sat an ancient-looking figure draped in tattered robes. Its face was obscured, hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow across its features. Around the figure floated more orbs of light, swirling like moths drawn to a flame. As I approached cautiously, mesmerized by the brilliant glow, the figure lifted its head slightly. The air turned cold, and I felt a wave of power radiating from it, the ground trembling beneath my feet as the whispers returned. "You've come to join us." "No," I shouted, grounded in my determination. "I'm here to end this." My voice rang out clear, echoing in the wide space. The orbs dimmed for a fraction of a moment, and I could sense the figure's anger beneath the calm disposition. The air thickened with tension, and the chilling wind began to swirl, wrapping around my body. "You think you can escape our grasp," the being spoke, its voice low and hauntingly beautiful, yet full of menace. "You carry the spark of light, but even the brightest flame can be snuffed out." The words made my resolve waver, the shadowy energy dry and threatening as it encircled the clearing, mixing with the taste of fear. I held the handkerchief tighter, feeling its warmth center on my heart. "You don't frighten me," I shot back, trying to sound confident, even when my voice quivered. "I won't be like those lost souls." The figure's lips twisted into a grin, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. "They were all brave once, just like you, before they were consumed by their darkness. What makes you think you're any different?" The orbs began to flicker like candles, their dim light reflecting the shadows amassed around me. I took a step back, realizing the truth in its words. Fear began to creep into my thoughts, shadows inching closer. Memories of my own struggles flashed in my mind, whispers of doubt trying to sink into my heart. I couldn't let this being penetrate my intention. I wouldn't become their next victim. With a surge of energy, the handkerchief glowed brilliantly, illuminating the clearing. "You will not take me," I shouted, lifting it high like a beacon. The figure recoiled slightly as the light brightened, but its grin only widened, madness glimmering in its eyes. "Very well," it hissed, the shadows swirling dangerously. "Let's see how long your flame lasts. The darkness is patient, and it only needs time to claim what it desires." The energy intensified around us, crackling with an unseen force. as I realized the battle had only begun. I had become a candle in a storm, clinging to my light while the shadows whipped around me with an unyielding hunger. It was clear that confronting this darkness would demand everything from me, but I stood firm, ready to fight against the tide. The forest echoed with the sound of my heart racing as I felt the shadows closing in again, bearing down like wolves drawn to prey. I would face whatever horrors lay before me, knowing that each step had taken me closer to the truth. The night was far from over, and the journey into the unknown had only just begun. I could only hope that I would emerge into the light once again. In that moment, I felt the weight of the darkness bearing down on me, like a heavy fog that threatened to smother the last flickers of hope I had in me. The figure's grin widened, and I could see its twisted nature even clearer now, a monstrous embodiment of everything that had sought to consume me. "You think your little light can protect you?" it taunted, its voice dripping with sinister glee. "You know nothing of the darkness that haunts this place." With every word, cold tendrils of shadow slithered closer, wrapping around my ankles like living chains, pulling me toward the ground. I fought against the binding energy, desperate to keep my light shining bright. Fueled by fear and rage, I raised the handkerchief higher, summoning all the warmth it had given me, pouring my will into that small piece of fabric, willing it to burst forth with more power than I had ever summoned. As I focused, the shadows recoiled, shrieking in frustration and rage, their grotesque forms flickering in and out of view. The ground shook violently, roots snapping up and twisting around in a wild dance, as if the very earth itself was rebelling against the figure that held dominion over this cursed place. "You cannot fight the inevitable." The figure's voice grew louder, echoing in a deep, resonant timbre that rattled my bones. "You will join them, and your flame will fade into the dark." With a final push of will, I thrust the shining handkerchief forward, sending a beam of light piercing through the oppressive darkness. The air grew thick with energy, a blinding radiance bursting from the fabric and engulfing everything around me. The shadows screamed, a deafening chorus of anguish as the light seared through them, leaving behind wisps of smoke and despair. I could see the twisted figures flinching as the glow edged closer, a desperate plea for a chance at freedom etched on their hollow faces. But just as the light began to swallow the darkness whole, a gust of wind surged through the clearing, sending icy tendrils spiraling around me, latching onto my wrists and ankles. It felt like they were trying to pull me apart, to keep me rooted in the very spot where the shadows threatened to claim me. "You are very brave, little one," the figure rasped, stepping closer as the light flickered momentarily. "But bravery cannot save you from what you truly are." I could sense the madness in its voice, the ancient darkness boiling to the surface. I could feel my resolve waning as the shadows tightened their grip, wrapping around my very essence. All the memories of doubt that I had pushed away came flooding back, a surge of fear mingling with urgency. I remembered every moment that had led me to this point, the struggles, the pain, the isolation. Through the chaos, I realized that this wasn't just a battle against darkness. It was a fight against everything that had ever sought to hold me down. And in that realization, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I could reclaim my light. With a heart-stopping cry, I concentrated on every bit of love and joy that existed within me. I remembered my laughter, the warmth of the sun, and the smiles of those I cherished. I poured all of that into the light and willed it to expand, pushing back against the clutches of despair. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked in pain as the light enveloped me completely, radiating outward in a wave that seemed to stretch beyond the clearing. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, clearing the fog of doubt as the shadows drowned in their own darkness. The figure twisted angrily, its form warping, legs melding into the surrounding chaos. As it realized it was losing its grip, the chilling wind swirled around me, but they couldn't touch what I had become. As the radiance surged, I saw the twisted faces of the lost souls shifting, flickering between states of torment and relief. Looking to me, as if I were their last hope, they reached out, fingers trembling, trying to escape the suffocating grasp of despair. The more I focused on the light, the more their forms began to shimmer, a bright glow illuminating their features. And then I understood. They could be freed. With all my strength, I directed the light toward them, sending a focus of warmth and reassurance into the depths of their suffering. "You don't have to stay," I pleaded, the words tumbling from me. "You can leave this place." As the words left my lips, the lost souls began to rearrange themselves, light pouring through their hollow eyes, drawing them toward the radiance I had created. One by one, they broke free from the shadows, their forms solidifying in the warm glow, transforming into shimmering figures that danced in the light. The ancient figure shrieked in rage. Unspeakable terror etched across its face as it watched one soul after another slip from its grasp. "You cannot take them." It lunged at me, a wave of darkness crashing like a tidal wave against my light. They belonged to me, but I was no longer afraid. I stood firm, light expanding beyond my control, filling the entire clearing with an incandescent luminance that swallowed the darkness whole. The grotesque form of the shadow being twisted violently, its shape warping, merging with the shadows of the forest that blocked the moonlight. I could hear its wrath, a chilling echo, fading into nothing as it lost its hold on the world. As the last of the souls broke free, a cascading wave of relief swept through them, filling the air with a sense of peace. They turned to me, their newly glowing forms stepping into the light with gratitude. I realized they were not just souls. They were pieces of the warmth and love I had conjured from my own heart. They belonged to a world beyond this darkness, a world free of fear and despair. Finally, when the last flicker of light consumed the darkness around me, a profound silence fell. I stood in the center, bathed in the glow, panting deeply as the shadows receded, returning to the depths from which they came. I felt an overwhelming sense of weight lift from my chest. It was over. But even as relief washed over me, I knew the echoes of this encounter would linger. The memories of the darkness still rattled in my mind, reminding me of the fragile balance between light and shadow that existed in every heart. I gazed into the clearing where the battles had been fought, a deep understanding settling within me. I had faced my fears and emerged victorious, but the remnants would always remain, a reminder of the strength it took to rise from despair. As I turned to leave, I felt a warmth in my heart, the light guiding me back through the forest, illuminating the path home. I carried the souls with me, not as burdens, but as companions, a bond forged through darkness and drawn to light. They became a part of me, and I knew I would carry their stories, honoring their journey and protecting their freedom. The moon broke through the clouds overhead as I stepped onto the familiar path leading back to my world. I could now see the beauty in the night, no longer a specter of fear, but a canvas for possibility. Somehow, I also knew that I had given new life not just to those lost souls, but to every chance of joy life had to offer. And with the dawn not far off, I took a deep breath, knowing that I would face whatever came next. I had emerged from the shadows, and as I walked into the light, I could feel the warmth of hope surrounding me, embracing me, and whispering a promise for the journey ahead.